Right, I'll go ahead and kick things off. Welcome everyone to the How to Turn Your Inbox into a Data Source with AI webinar. I'm super excited to welcome you all here today. My name is Adam Reisfield, and I've been with Parabola for 4.5 years. Along that time, I've built a couple thousand of workflows with a bunch of the brands that you see on the screen here. And many of those have started by actually pulling data from email. So really excited to share some of the examples and learnings that we've seen there. I've also worked on Parabola University over the years. So if you're thinking about, hey, how do I start to learn automation and AI? That's a really, really awesome resource for you and similar to some of the content we'll be going through today. And I've also more recently interviewed dozens of different operators at brands and service providers and financial services firms about how they're actually deploying AI in their day to day. So excited to kind of capture all of those learnings in this session today, where we'll kick off with just kind of covering like how can we think about your inbox in terms of turning it into a data source, and then beyond that, what are some of the use cases that we've seen across operations, supply chain, finance, procurement, so on and so forth, to really help you pin down what would be a good starting point. From there, we'll kind of talk about the importance of business logic, how you can actually deploy AI against your email data as we get more into the product. And we'll round it out by talking about how to go beyond just pulling data, standardizing, normalizing information from your inbox to actually automating the whole end-to-end process. And finally, we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. As much as I love talking to myself in a little room here for 30 minutes straight, I would love if you all threw in some questions in the chat as we go, and I'll do my best to keep an eye on the chat and answer those throughout the session. Without further ado, let's kick things off by talking about how to actually think about your inbox. We'll start with a gross oversimplification of the different types of emails that probably appear in your inbox every single day. I see we have one issue with sound before I keep going. For the rest of the group, can I just get a quick thumbs up that you are able to hear? Thumbs up. Amazing. Good luck working that out, Lauren. I appreciate it. So yeah, let's start with just a quick oversimplification of the different types of emails that are landing in your inbox today. So first are emails that require human judgment, right? This is where you want to be spending your time. These are emails that, we're years and years away from AI being able to handle, if at all. The second bucket is going to be all of your marketing emails, spam, transactional emails that realistically you're probably just archiving. Maybe you're looking at the ones that are important. But when we're thinking about how to deploy AI in your inbox, this probably is not the place. Third, these are going to be emails that require some type of action or validation, reconciliation, system updates upon receiving those. And this is really going to be the bucket of emails that we're talking about in today's session. And when we kind of go into like, hey, what are those kinds of emails that require logic-based action? What are we really talking about here? We see this pop up with things where maybe we are copying information from a body of an email to go update siloed systems so that we have real-time accurate information. Maybe we are needing to download Excel files, PDFs from attachments to actually validate those, make sure vendors and third parties are sharing accurate information. We see use cases where we're converting PDF to CSV data, where we need to upload it to a system, or maybe we are actually notifying other individuals based on information we receive. Altogether, these represent the types of things where, if you had unlimited capital and you hired an intern and you gave them a really detailed bullet list of, hey, every time you receive this email, this is the process that we should follow, where maybe there's a little bit of human judgment, but a pretty repeatable process. Those are the types of processes that are super primed for AI and automation to come in, save you a ton of time, and start taking some of this work off of your plate. Now, when we think about how these types of things are typically happening today, see two main processes playing out. The first, classic, just manually processing this information, right? Ultimately, that's not going to be the best use of your talent. These processes are really error prone and repetitive. And so ultimately, yes, you might have this big meaty project that you know is going to move the business forward, but your team might be spending hours every day processing emails in their inbox, making sure your systems maintain accurate data, and it ultimately gets in the way of that higher impact work. The second thing we see super frequently is these emails just going entirely ignored, right? An invoice comes in, a packing list comes in, maybe someone opens the file, maybe not, maybe this email is automatically archived, maybe there was a discrepancy that the team never caught. And so all of a sudden, you're paying more for shipments than maybe you needed to. Data is falling out of date in your TMS because you're not actually updating all that information. And ultimately, this is how things slip through the cracks. This is how mistakes compound. And as you're trying to capture more and more data so you can make better decisions, the inbox represents one of the biggest places where data is lost on a day to day basis, representing a meaningful opportunity to increase your data capture. Now, let's talk a little bit about making this more tangible with some use cases. First of all, where are we actually seeing these things pop up? The first broad bucket I'll point to is with processing email attachments. These could be CSVs, Excel files, PDFs, so on and so forth. You can think about things like the invoices that you're receiving, especially if part of your role is tracking spend, trying to reduce costs across your organization. You might be getting invoices from carriers, vendors, 3PLs, so on and so forth. We see this a lot with shipping documents, especially when we're importing goods from and going through customs. Might also be packing lists, bills of lading, so on and so forth. See a bunch of use cases, especially for teams working with multiple different vendors or suppliers, where you're receiving price lists that you need to update in different systems, rate sheets, and then you have a whole bunch of other attachments that I'm sure you all know and love or hate. Second bucket here are all the details that are shared in the body of an email that are usually way less structured, messier, harder to work with. These might be, someone at your carrier just writing you an email saying, "Hey, for this load, it's been updated to this ETA date. It's going through this port, so on and so forth." Totally unstructured. Maybe they send a table in the body of an email. Maybe they're sending just a link that you need to click and download to access a CSV file or PDF. Really unstructured, really unstandardized, really hard to actually automate. The third, this is a little bit of a different flavor here. This is going to be around integrating systems. Think about the worst system that you work with on a day-to-day basis that maybe was developed in, 2007. It doesn't have an API. It's impossible to get data in and out. We see a lot of teams that even with those horrible systems, they're able to set up recurring email reports. So for instance, every day at 9 a.m., email me this exported CSV on a recurring basis. Even though they don't have an API, they're still able to integrate with these systems by using email as kind of like the lowest common denominator way of integrating data between systems. So really good for legacy providers, niche systems without APIs, so on and so forth. Now, to make that a little bit more specific, in green here, these are a bunch of the most common use cases that we see here at Parabola that are really primed for automation and AI deployment across ops, supply chain, and finance. Everything in green represents use cases where one of the data sources is commonly email. Three-way match, if you're in supply chain, procurement, accounting, is probably a really, really common one for you. But anytime you're working with data from a third party, whether that is information informing vendor scorecards, invoices you're getting from carriers and 3PLs, information that is ultimately helping you track shipments or book accruals at the end of the month. A lot of times you're receiving information that goes into this process via email. So the more that you're able to capture throughout the month, the faster you can close on the finance side of the house. And the more you can capture this information and update systems and keep stakeholders informed, the less questions there are going to be like, where is this shipment? Or what's the status of this specific item? Now, for you, how do we actually start identifying these use cases, right? This is going to be hopefully one of the more tangible things that you take away from this conversation. I would recommend looking out for any times where your team is downloading attachments coming from emails repetitively. You're copying and pasting data out of emails. A lot of times, maybe you are changing the format of the date so that it fits your specific system. You are needing to open up data in Excel. You're copying information, pasting it into a doc. There might be times where people are asking like, "Hey, did we receive this yet? What's the latest on this specific shipment? Did this purchase order come through?" Things of that nature. And then you can think about just generally all the information coming from your third parties, right? Maybe they have amazing APIs that integrate with your ERP and everything is 100% seamless. More often than not, we see a lot email being the main channel for communication between third parties and brands and suppliers, and so another really common source there. Last thing I'll point to, as I kind of hit on earlier, think about if there is a system that you've never been able to integrate with and it drives you crazy that you just can't get this data from point A to point B. Maybe they offer the ability to just email that report every morning, every night, whatever you need. And that could be another way to potentially increase your automation surface area and start getting better data across your systems. Now, before we actually get into the tooling of what this looks like and how to actually implement this, I think it's important to just hit on the importance of business logic here. So, this is very common sense, but inbox automation is only as strong as your business rules, right? If you don't understand the flow of data, what your rules are, it's really hard to build automation. And we see a lot of teams who come to Parabola, they're hungry to use AI, deploy automation. But when we sit down and get into the nitty gritty of a process, it takes us longer to actually figure out the business logic than it does to build the automation. So I would think about what are the rules that you can create to really standardize all of these processes before you start implementing, right? What rules can you create based on who's sending an email, what the subject is, what the file names are, and then how is that data actually transformed and actioned on, right? Do you need to reconcile this information? Do you need to standardize SKUs? Do you need to reformat date values? Do you need to go update NetSuite, send an email to a third party, trigger a Slack message? The more you can map out these things, the easier it'll be to implement automation on top of that. And so to reiterate, we really see not the tooling being the biggest barrier or technical capabilities even, but rather just having that process mapped out. So if you're really hungry to get started and start automating an email process, I would just pick one process, map it out end to end, even if it's just a bunch of bullets in a note or a Word doc, just map out some thoughts so that once you start implementing, you're not trying to reinvent the wheel with the process, but you're really focused on the tooling piece of it. And to give you a specific example here, let's imagine we have a carrier invoice and we've built our business logic, right? Every time our team inbox receives an invoice from Sean and Jacob at Carrier Logistics, tag the email with carrier invoice and forward it to Parabola for processing. When I say forward it to Parabola for processing, maybe we'll be extracting these line items, reconciling all of our different costs. Maybe we're categorizing things into spend buckets, so on and so forth. Now, in Gmail, this is the example we're going to look at for this example. This is where we can kind of build the foundation of our business rules that are going to have information flow from your inbox into Parabola, right? Basically mirroring what I just walked through. We're saying, hey, if we get an email from either of these individuals to our team inbox, logistics@hatsforless.com, the subject includes invoice and it has an attachment, then we want to create a filter to forward this to Parabola. We have a whole bunch of documentation set up that kind of walks you through how to set all of this up. But this is the core of what's going to enable some of these auto forwarding rules that are the backbone of a lot of this business logic and enable this automation. So once I've set something like this up, we can set up rules like, hey, when this is true, we're going to skip the inbox. We're going to mark it as red. We're going to label it. We're going to forward it to Parabola. And this lets us go on to then deploy AI against our email data. So let's imagine you're starting from scratch. You're like, hey, Adam, I know my use case. I understand what you're talking about. How do I actually start building this now? So here I am in a blank canvas. Right now we are in Parabola, and the way that we build in Parabola are really through three types of steps. The first of those are going to be steps to pull data in, whether that's email, NetSuite, Shopify, so on and so forth. Then we need to transform our data. Maybe we need to apply a math calculation, combine data like a VLOOKUP, aggregate data like a pivot table. And then finally, we can send data off wherever it needs to go, whether that is sending an email, a Slack message, updating NetSuite, so on and so forth. In this example, since we're talking about emails, under key integrations, you're going to see extract from email, and I'm just going to click to bring that right here onto the canvas. Now, when I double click, you're going to see on the left-hand side, it's saying, hey, send emails to this address, and then tell us what data you want to pull in. So I'm going to say, let's go ahead and pull in a PDF, and we're going to use a packing list that I have downloaded on my computer. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this email. I'm going to go into Gmail. I'm going to say, all right, I have a packing list. I'm going to say find attached, and then I'll just go ahead and drag this attachment right into Parabola. I'm going to send that off. And now let's imagine you weren't sitting with me on a webinar to actually build this out. How would you get started if you didn't know that extract from email was the step? If I click this button in the top left-hand corner, this is going to open up Parabola's AI agent that I can use to actually build as I go. So I can say, how can I pull a PDF from an email? Parabola is not only going to search our documentation, look at example use cases, and figure out what the best step is to use and give you that advice. It'll actually add steps directly to the canvas for you to ultimately speed up that building process. And so right now I can see, because I sent this email in, Parabola is now running, processing, analyzing that PDF with AI. And then right after, I'd see I get an answer from the AI agent on exactly how to build this out. Now, just so you don't have to wait here, I pulled this into another step here. So here I can see in this extract from email step, we have pulled the email content and attachment with AI. And you can see my packing list loaded up here. I've got some handwriting. I've got some information at the top, like a PO number and all of these different rows and columns that I ultimately want to extract and standardize so that I can work with this data the same way I'd work with a CSV export from Shopify or something like that. Now, the way that we do this is first by using AI to analyze the contents of the email and provide basically a framework for what we think you're trying to extract, and then let you basically do fine tuning on top of that. So where it says extract a table, Parabola is automatically looking at your PDF and trying to find a table. So we're saying, hey, I found all these fields. This looks like a packing list. Do you want to pull the packing list data? Yes, I do. It has all the different items here that are found in the header of our table. And then I can go ahead and do some fine tuning on top of that. So maybe I want to provide some example values, because anytime we're working with LLMs, the more examples and fine tuning we provide, the better our results. So I can say, hey, just extract the product name and color, not the size. For example, if you see this value where S represents size, let's just extract the beginning of that. And so for all of these fields, you can see this isn't really super dependent on the specific structure of this PDF. It's not like OCR where we're tagging specific fields in a document. It's a bit more flexible where we're describing column names, we're providing instructions, and taking a more nuanced approach to extraction here. And we can do the same thing for our keys, right? This is the information at the top of our document that's not necessarily in a structured table, where we can provide some example values. We can say, hey, this might be called something like PO number or PO or PO hashtag, so on and so forth. So the document doesn't have to be structured the exact same every single time. Now, we also can work with fields that are not on attachments, right? These are things like the body of your email, the subject, what's the file name? Can we get a URL for the packing list that was attached so that maybe we can go upload that file into a different system? All of these records historically have been really hard to standardize, extract from emails, take action on, basically build decision trees. And this makes it really easy to go from this messy PDF and email to a nice structured data set, as you see here. Now, there's a whole lot more that we can do on this front, whether we are working with Excel files, JSON, CSVs. We can deploy different methods of parsing, really just making it easy to go from messy data to standardized data. But once we do that, that's not the whole challenge, right? Then we actually need to automate this whole end-to-end process. So what could it look like to go from here, right? Maybe we need to say, hey, I don't need all columns that I extracted. Let me remove some and rename some of our values so we have a nice clean data set. And then maybe zooming out here for a second, maybe what I want to do is, now that I've received a packing list, I want to compare that to our initial purchase order to figure out basically, did we receive what we ordered? In the process, there are a whole bunch of different opportunities to deploy AI to make it easier to transform data and standardize information we're getting from third parties. Once we've actually said, hey, these are the columns we want, maybe we want to do something like look at all of our different products and categorize them into a specific product category. So you can see now something like men's running socks, I'm classifying into socks. We have a headwear category, so on and so forth. And a really common use case when we're dealing with third-party data is needing to standardize, right? You can imagine all of your vendors maybe have a slightly different way of representing your colors or your SKUs in their system. And you can come in here with the standardize with AI step and say, hey, look at the values in the color column, standardize them. If you see anything similar to this, I want it to say black. If you see anything similar to this, I want it to say white. And you can add additional fine tuning to make this really, really accurate. Now, as we go here, one of the use cases I see being most helpful is when we're taking information from an email and comparing it to data in one of our systems to basically figure out, is this accurate? Is action required? Do I need to escalate this? So on and so forth. So in this example, you can imagine I'm pulling a whole bunch of records from NetSuite where we have for different purchase orders, what was the quantity we ordered for a given SKU and size. So here, if you think about like a VLOOKUP or an index match in Excel, gnarly syntax, not fun to make. In Parabola, we can use a combine table step where we're basically saying, hey, let's go combine these two tables. I want to join these where we're not just matching on purchase order, we're matching on purchase order, SKU, size, and ultimately now all in one view, we can see our quantity from our packing list in the same table that we have the quantity that we ordered from our purchase order data. From here, one of the most interesting uses of AI that we'll see is using natural language to actually dictate how your data is transformed, what kind of analysis you're doing, and kind of going from really rigid formulas that are brittle, hard to hand off between teammates, to just building this logic with natural language. So here, what I'm interested to understand was basically, was there a receiving discrepancy, right? And if there was, of how much? So I'm writing out in this custom transform step, which basically translates your instruction into custom code using AI. I'm saying, hey, let's create a new column where we calculate our receiving discrepancy by doing ordered minus what we got on our packing list. Then let's also create another column called discrepancy status and assign one of these three values based on the discrepancy. You can see Parabola took these instructions, it turned it into custom code, which has been applied to our data set so we can see our new columns here. And it also provides us with a logic summary so we can see exactly how our data is being transformed step by step. The very last step here is ultimately to take action on this data, right? So if you wanted to create some kind of dashboard or visualization to represent data you're receiving from a third party, or you want to combine this with the information you're using for reporting, that could be one approach. Or maybe if we need to escalate things, we could, for instance, say, hey, first I want to filter for anything that wasn't a match. So this gives me just my 5 rows where I actually had discrepancies. And then maybe one approach is I want to send an email, a CSV attachment to the team so that they can actually go investigate those discrepancies. Or we just released a new send to Slack integration. And with this step, I can say, hey, I want to go send a message into this channel. Here is the alert that I want to send. I want to tag myself. I want to include a link to our packing list file maybe. And if I go ahead and click send test message here and jump into Slack, you're going to see really quickly, I have that nice, clean data right here in Slack. So the second we receive a packing list that has a discrepancy, I'm going to know immediately, and we're not going to need to go chasing this across a bunch of different email threads and backtracking to figure out those discrepancies. Of course, there's a whole lot more we could do with this data. We could send it to NetSuite. We could send it to Shopify. We could create reporting dashboards. But hopefully this gives you a good holistic look at all the different ways that you can operationalize data coming into your inbox, transform it, and then ultimately action on it wherever it needs to go. With the last 5 minutes here, I'm happy to take some questions from the group. So if you do have any types of questions on use cases, functionality, how we commonly see this deployed, feel free to drop those questions in the chat right now. Otherwise, I will share a little bit of information on other resources as we round out here. While we wait to see if there are any questions here, one resource that I will show you is in Parabola University, which you can find on our website under resources. There is a course on both the fundamentals of Parabola, so how do we pull data, transform, so on and so forth. And then also under bonus lessons, there is a lesson on pulling data from emails. So if you're looking for more of a bite-sized recap of what we covered today, this would be an awesome recap. We did have a question here from Chris on, is it possible to match files from your email with a third-party portal. Without knowing the specific portal, the answer I'll give you is it depends, but most likely yes. The use case that we'll see a lot is, hey, we're going to pull one attachment from an email, and then we're going to pull data from our third-party portal, either via API, database, FTP, if we need to web scrape, something like that. There are a whole bunch of different approaches to actually getting data from third-party portals. But as far as joining that data together, that's going to be very simple and straightforward with that combined table step that we were looking at earlier. We also had a question from Matt. Does this work for Gmail, Outlook, etc.? Any restrictions on email type? Good question, Matt. Answer is yes. Any email provider that's going to support setting up some of those forwarding rules, which to my knowledge is just about any of them, should be totally compatible with the type of rules that we're building here, whether you're using Gmail, Outlook, so on and so forth. Awesome. Well, I will leave you with one last thing here. If you are hungry to start building, you can create an account for free and start testing this at parabola.io. We'll share some follow-up resources for how you can actually set up those auto forwarding rules along with that Parabola University lesson that I showed you. And if you're kind of thinking, hey, this isn't maybe relevant for me, or this would be super relevant for another individual, we do have a referral program where you can earn up to $2,000 anytime you refer someone who ultimately becomes a customer. So definitely check that out and really hope you enjoy playing around. Last thing I will mention here is an answer to Sergio's question. Is there a way for Parabola to create a summary of the emails you received yesterday? In short, you could create a workflow where you're storing a bunch of different emails in a Parabola table and then have another step to look at all that data, summarize it, and send you an email about it. I wouldn't call it a top use case, but it's definitely possible. Hopefully this has kind of showed you how flexible the system can be. And definitely feel free to check out Parabola to actually start building these things yourself. Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll send you a recording of this session, and definitely feel free to reach out with any other questions. My email is adam@parabola.io. Thanks a lot for joining us today.